Hello and welcome to the H&N podcast. I am Trevor Simpson, Associate Editor at CoStar News Hotels, and joining me on the podcast today is STR's Regional Vice President of the Asia Pacific region, Jesper Palmqvist. Jesper, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. Good evening and good morning from Singapore.
And good morning from Cleveland. So, we sort of alluded to it on our podcast last month that we were going to talk a bit about China on this month's episode and whether it's finally turning that corner or not. Jesper, what are your insights on China from this past month?
Yeah, it's interesting, and they're definitely getting more questions around it in the current economic climate, not just globally, but within China. And people are waiting on signs and signals as we come in. In part, there could be some seasonality, but I had a quick look here and I spoke to a bunch of people. The main thing is, of course, have we reached bottom? Have we started turning around, and particularly around rates? Demand is one thing, just like in the US and the UK in light of all the tariff wars, we're seeing more domestic travel, right?
Right.
And that happens in China as well. So what about the negative rate growth? So I look at some of the engines. If you start Chongqing, big automotive production, a big heart there in West China, they are still behind 2024 in the last 4 to 6 weeks. It's by as much as 10% in ADR. So that's not moving. But then you look at Beijing. In May, so in the last, what is it now, like 3.5 weeks, there are more days with a very minimal decline than we've seen in April and March. And the occupancy is fine. So RevPAR almost kind of maybe perhaps flattish if I'm stretching it.
Yeah.
And then I looked at only luxury in Beijing, and that is slightly ahead of that. So I like the signs in Beijing. And then I went more south or east and look at Guangzhou, another first tier market, and also Hangzhou. Those markets since end of April, pretty much on 24 levels in rate. So that's a good sign year over year. And for the good story, I suppose, is Shanghai. They are finally ahead in May, and that's along with Shenzhen across the border from Hong Kong. So you have a variety, and I would say that 4 to 6 weeks ago, so when we spoke last, we did not have those signs. It was kind of everyone, most of the markets moving down. And you've seen in quarterly earnings from major hotel groups, Western ones, that this is not the money-making machine in the last quarter. So I think there are signs, early signs, that we maybe start to turn this around. Some of it could be seasonality pushing in there, but there's something to follow in the next few weeks. And I am cautiously optimistic that we're starting in Q2 to see some movement there on weekdays as well.
That would definitely be a welcome sign for hoteliers in China. Speaking of Hong Kong, you're going to Hong Kong tomorrow. What are you seeing over in that region over the past month or so?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Hong Kong tends to act a little bit differently, so I'm excited going back up to Hong Kong and over the border into Shenzhen as well. It's really interesting in the last few years to compare the dynamic between the fast growing Shenzhen youthful population, a lot of industry starting there, and Hong Kong, which has such a strong legacy, and people have had a lot of opinions around it, but it is still a very important market, a strong market with great hotels and travel. So I was looking at it year to date, it's a mixed story because occupancy is like 4% up from last year and ADR is 4% down. So it is flat in top line. Um, and the actual levels are close to 84% year to date.
Hmm.
So that's high occupancy, right? And
Right.
traditionally, Singapore and Hong Kong and Tokyo would have some of the highest occupancies. So that 84%, that's what Hong Kong used to have back in 2015-16. There is still room for growth because the peak year was 2018. Remember, 2019 was some political turmoil. So 2018 in peak, it was close to 90% year to date in
Wow.
the first 4 or 5 months. And that's peak season is fourth quarter in Hong Kong. So I think we have different demand sources in Hong Kong compared to 7 years ago, but
Hmm.
expectations broadly are that the demand will continue to grow slowly on an annual basis. We look at our forecast, historic highs like those, the last 5% is going to be hard, but we're forecasting to see those 90s maybe year to date by the end of the decade, 28, 29. That's how slow that can take. But
Right.
rates are a bit, like I said, under pressure. And it's particularly during low season when you see in the last couple of years, and that's June, July in Hong Kong when it gets really hot and muggy. We think full year 25, it will really depend on how that fourth quarter can lift the market overall. We think, again, luxury does slightly better than the
Hmm.
overall market. The biggest decline we see in Hong Kong overall is Sunday to maybe Tuesday, Wednesday, so that early start of the week, which I think you see in many markets. Weekend is stronger. People are heading over and down to Hong Kong and having a great weekend. But what's interesting with this, and I think this is a common story around Asia Pacific, is that profitability still improved, both
Hmm.
GOP per available room and margins. It's and maybe it's too easy to say that it's just productivity and cost management. There's so much around that helps. 24 was more challenging as well, so I suppose year over year it looks a bit better. But
Yeah.
Hong Kong is such a special market in development. Right now in the pipeline is 4 hotels. It's
Wow.
yeah, and then that's quite a lot for Hong Kong because you have it's 1,250 rooms and there's some renovations happening. It's a tight market. People are
Hmm.
going for quality for sure, just like in other asset classes over quantity, sustainability and tech investment are other trends. And we're seeing more conversions. I was talking to our friends at CBRE and they were talking around as well how there's conversions of hotels repurposed into student accommodation and co-living, and that's happening in Hong Kong for the past 6, 7 years. I think the stat was from them 17 hotels have been repurposed into student accommodation co-living since then. That's 3,000 rooms, at 3% of the total inventory, because the
Wow.
government went in with policies to attract more non-local students and foreign workforce, etc. So it's an
Right.
interesting trend that is happening there.
You mentioned that Hong Kong is still trying to get back to that 2018 level, and it might take until the end of the decade. What has to happen in the market for them to get back to that level?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that's going to be that corporate early week as well to keep going, and it's easy to get into when a lot of it becomes hearsay, like oh, a lot of businesses left Hong Kong, etc. But it's still a great market for business for sure. A lot of foreign and Chinese companies from mainland China are in Hong Kong and driving business, and as it settles how it interacts with as part of GBA, the Greater Bay Area. So I still think it's proven in the last 12 to 18 months that it can have high demand levels, that it continues to drive in Wednesday, Thursday as strong weekdays. So I think it's the business mix that is different. You'll need more events as well. I know they're focusing around that, trying to make sure they attract concerts and big conferences around the expo at the airport. So more of that and the overall business meetings that continues to happen. And then they will reach those even higher occupancy levels. And with that comes, of course, rate yielding and compression and even higher rates, where
Right.
traditionally we've seen some of the highest in Asia Pacific.
So let's shift gears again and just talk about Southeast Asia in general. Do you have any takeaways of the trends over the past month in the Southeast Asia region?
Yeah, it continues to be quite diverse, with some going in different directions. We're next week we're meeting up. When people listen to this, we're getting together all the annual general meeting at the Singapore Hotel Association. Obviously, we just had Lady Gaga in the market, which helps overall. An event like that does not have the same impact as Taylor Swift, etc., but it obviously drives F&B and the whole market. And it was 4 concerts in what 6, 7 days, successful events, and it obviously helps as a spike with the rate pressure that we've seen. But we're also seeing across Southeast Asia that pressure on profitability. Singapore is a little bit of an anomaly. It's just more volatile with the labor constraints that
Hmm.
we see here. But it's holding up okay, and I think we're still forecasting for Singapore to see some gentle small growth overall by the end of the year, because luxury does pretty well. It's the same shift in sub-markets here. March was just not a good month, right? But since then, we talked about that, but April and May seems to drive slowly in the right direction. Jakarta and Bali go in the same way. There's differences again in if it's economy and luxury. Maybe the
Yeah.
biggest story in Southeast Asia is maybe Thailand, because we saw a drop in demand occupancy from February, and that kind of continued into April, May, yeah, particularly luxury and upper upscale. So high-end hotels. And it's true, there was an increase in supply, but a lot of it is driven by Bangkok. So it's more than the supply. There is a gap in people saying, "Oh, that was a tight month," and where they're looking for May as is a little bit better, but it's
Hmm.
still, yeah, maybe not. We're coming into low season there as well, right, for those months,
Right.
and length of stay a bit shorter as well, apparently. So I think Bangkok, that's one to follow and see how that trends towards the next few months here, if they can hold that up, because otherwise it's the same story we talked about before. Vietnamese regional markets growing, coming back, etc. And I think May has been an interesting month. It was a lot of pressure in like I was saying in Thailand. Demand was dropping, and I think luxury is a little bit better
Hmm.
because they can drive those rates and hold it up a little bit better. And we also looked in Southeast Asia on business on the books, what's happening ahead. And Bali is coming up on peak season for the next 90 days, like June, July there, and that's a resort market that has had two great peak seasons. And right now on the books, it's even stronger than last year. So that's a great sign. So I think we have an opportunity for Bali to do, if rates follow, that it could be really good. Um, some markets are a bit slower than last year. Phuket is joining Bangkok there when it comes into low season. Kuala Lumpur, that I've talked about before, and Malaysia, I've been excited about it. It's the growth is slowing down. So the question now is if they can stop that there and keep having more arrivals, because domestic is what it is, but you need those international arrivals coming in there as well. And I think the final point on Singapore is, even though there's trouble there, when I look at ahead 90 days and towards the end of the year, it is 3-4% ahead of last year. But the
Hmm.
driver of that is in July, because we got 3 weeks of the World Aquatics Championships. So your
Nice.
water polo and the swimming, everything is happening. And that's like, is it 40,000 people, something like that, that comes to the city? So it's a big event,
Wow.
and that drives a lot of demand, a lot of it in regional areas rather than city, because, for rate purposes, but that helps the city overall. So again, the power of big events, particularly those longer sporting events, are massive. So a mixed bag, if you summarize that. But I
Right.
think and that continues. And it's one of those things I look for the Q3 and into 26. We will continue to see um, that misalignment in growth paths, or if it starts to align a bit more. I think it will align a bit more once Vietnam slows down, etc., and Singapore has stops that rate drop. Then we'll see maybe a little bit more alignment as well.
That was going to be my next question. With the summer months coming up, what are some markets to follow or just some general storylines as the summer unfolds?
Yeah, I think so. If I counter you and say coming into winter, so yeah, you sit in your northern hemisphere. Listen, I think it's absolutely interesting to look at New Zealand for those who invest there and track that market, because obviously we had the big, how particularly Auckland with new supply and less
Yeah.
arrivals, etc. We're similar to China, and we can talk more about that next month, and how when we really into winter, and if Auckland can start seeing turning that trend along with Wellington, because down south in Queenstown is really the only market that we've seen they were able to hold this up a little bit better. And Australia again looks very stable coming into winter, like we've seen before. This is on the books as well. But otherwise, it really depends. If you're coming into peak season, like say Bali, you can clearly see there's something happening. But then you look at Phuket, where it's the opposite. It's the low season. It's more rainy season coming in July, August, September. Then it's a little bit softer. It's harder when it's low season, right? But
Yeah.
it's also arguably the opportunity when you can drive and
Right.
get some more demand coming in. So I think, yeah, generally there is Summer. When you live on the equator, what's summer? I don't know anymore. It's always summer here, Trevor. It's always summer.
We have to talk about some footy. Your Sydney Swans are reeling. I'm going to give you the floor to discuss their recent play.
Oh, yeah. It's Listen, if someone tells me again that it's our season over, I'm like, listen, I live on the hope, and let's ignore the because otherwise in Australia right now they care about the state of origin. So that's something for you to read up on. The Maroons and the Blues. Yeah, look that up, everyone. But and in the ice hockey world championships that it ended, but in the footy, the big issue for Sydney, our excuse for Swannies is Errol Gulden, like Gulden, our biggest player. He and Papley and Cunningham, they're all out with injuries. They're like 4 to 6 weeks away. They're sorely missed, no doubt. And during the Demons last weekend, I thought there was some momentum, but in the first quarter, their mistakes just made us kind of be stay in the game. But it was a no contest. So Melbourne won that one at the MCG and ran away. We're not giving up, but at the same time, obviously, we're happy for Matthew. The Lions are roaring away, and your Roos struggling, but no doubt because they played Collingwood. It's always
Yeah,
going to be hard, but you got a big game coming up this weekend. You're playing West Coast Eagles, so it's a race to the bottom. So I'm gonna be rooting for your Roos that they get their second win of the season, or third actually. They've won 2 games, so this could be the third win. And Swannies, if we get a run together with a couple of wins, but they're playing the Crows at home from Adelaide, and that's going to be tough too. So hey, there's always hope, and there's always footy.
there's always footy. Yeah, welcome to the bottom, I guess. I'm obviously used to it with North Melbourne. We're always down at the bottom. Sydney, obviously not having their strongest year,
No,
but
unfortunately, no.
it's just like in the hotel industry. It's always a mixed bag. Some fan bases are going to be happy, some are not. So there's the takeaway. It all comes back to footy.
Footy is just like the hotel development right now. There you go. Well done, Trevor. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
All right, Jesper, pleasure as always. Thank you for joining the podcast, and we will talk to you next month.
Will do. Thank you, Trevor. Appreciate it.
Hi, I'm STR's Isaac Colazo.
And I'm co-stars Jan Freitag. And together we are the data geeks behind Tell Me More, a hospitality data podcast on the Hotel News Now podcast network.
Every month, we bring you a fresh take on the latest hotel data, insights into the travel trends behind that performance, and the big picture topics you should be thinking about.
And we also don't mind getting into some good-natured disagreement from time to time. Hey, when Isaac and I start talking data together, anything can happen, and it usually does.
Find us on hotelnewsnow.com and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you like to listen. Search for Hotel News Now, and thank you for listening.
This episode of the Hotel News Now podcast was recorded on May 27th, 2025, and edited by Trevor Simpson. For more hotel industry news, go to hotelnewsnow.com every day.